What do you get when you cross Resident Evil and Sesame Street with a little bit of BioShock sprinkled on top? Well, you get My Friendly Neighborhood. Now, at a glance, it certainly isn't the most unique idea of all time, and as I'm sure some of you are aware, the mascot horror genre is kind of filled with lots of cash grabs, asset flips, or just general shovelware slop. But before you look past this one too, allow me these few minutes to explain why My Friendly Neighborhood is actually full of heart and pretty great. My Friendly Neighborhood begins with you getting sent into a rundown old TV studio to shut down a mysterious broadcast. Once you arrive, it becomes clear that the former stars are not too happy with the current state of the studio, which will make your job a lot harder. Narratively, it's pretty simple stuff here, and kind of what you'd expect from the premise, with scattered notes and documents that tell a brief backstory of the studio. It's also voice acted, so that offers some room for dialogue between your character and the many cast members you'll encounter. Now, I don't think the main actor is particularly amazing, unfortunately, but he does a decent job. The other characters, however, are pretty great, and all had some really fun and distinct voices. I actually found their little catchphrases to be very well written too, and they always struck a great balance of being slightly off-putting, but never veering into the territory of trying too hard to be creepy or just talking about murdering everyone. Instead, there's plenty of playfully weird bits in here, and I genuinely would stop and listen every time I heard the "What does Norman notice?" bit.
I notice, cameras, lights, producers, children. Notice the children! Norman has noticed!
The main story is pretty bare bones, however, but much like the character's dialogue, it does a good job steering clear of the annoying mascot horror tropes and doesn't try too hard to be edgy or super convoluted. It's nothing special and mostly takes a back seat, but I think that's perfectly fine and it gets the job done. Gameplay-wise, it's very clear that My Friendly Neighborhood takes direct inspiration from early Resident Evil in pretty much all of its mechanics. I mean, inventory management, small puzzles, keys, locked doors, finite resources, you name it. But thankfully, it's all really well crafted, and clearly comes from a place of deep appreciation for the genre. This is especially true for the ink ribbon style save system, where you find coins throughout the environment and use them in safe rooms to save the game and or heal. But there's a finite amount of them, and if you run out, well, that also means you run out of saves. Personally, I really like this decision, as it adds a lot more tension to the game because now dying actually means something more than just respawning at a checkpoint 30 seconds ago. We don't really see a lot of modern games actually have stakes or punish players, so I appreciated that they stuck to their guns on this one and kept that system in place. Now, of course, I'm sure some of you will then be wondering about the difficulty, and no need to worry, there are multiple options, and personally, I did not find it too hard on normal, but the higher difficulty settings should offer a decent challenge for veteran survival horror players, and for those concerned about the limited saves, there is also an easier option as well. From a combat standpoint, it's also very similar to Resident Evil, where running headfirst into every encounter is not really advised, especially since enemies respawn, and you will be doing a lot of backtracking. In that way, it's very intentionally designed to be less about the action and more about navigating the map and managing your resources, which I think works well for the game and makes up for the relatively basic combat mechanics. Of course, that's not to say that the shooting is bad or anything, it's certainly really solid, but the enemies aren't very complex and there's not much to it aside from occasionally stunning them. This game does have another cool feature, however, which is the resource of tape. Like everything else, it is finite, but using it allows you to tie up enemies so they can no longer respawn. I think it helps add a solid bit of strategy, as you need to decide which enemies are easy to avoid and which ones are going to be a pain in the ass and need to be tied down. Now, speaking of enemies, there's not much in the way of variety, and really there's only 2 main types, with 6 others that are relegated to specific locations. However, since the game is only 5 to 7 hours long and heavy combat isn't a huge focus, I thought that amount was fine. Aside from combat, you'll be spending most of your time exploring the different areas and finding keys and items to help you progress, while also solving small puzzles along the way. In that regard, there is a lot of backtracking and inventory management, but I always found it enjoyable, and I liked how interconnected most of the areas were. It also helps that the atmosphere in general is very good too, with lots of playful items, pictures, secrets, and environments, with a subtle but effective jazz-inspired soundtrack underlining the game. I particularly liked the design of the first big area, with this giant Sesame Street style set ready to be explored. The puzzles were definitely on the simple side, but I thought they worked well, and there's just a bunch of fun little moments to be found throughout the game. Now look, I'm gonna be honest, there's not much more that I really want to say because I just had a great time with this game. Does it have small issues? Yeah. Is it gonna blow you away? Unlikely. But in an era where every new game feels like it's 2 or 3 times longer than it should be, it's nice when a fun little experience allows me to just get in, have a good time for a few hours, and get out. And I think that counts for something. There's also plenty of achievements and different modes, including a ranking system and a speedrun timer, so I think there's certainly a lot of value in the package as well. For any fans of old survival horror, it's an easy recommendation. And for those who haven't played survival horror games, I think it's actually a great entry point. Again, it's probably not going to top your Game of the Year list, but I think My Friendly Neighborhood is simply an engaging and charming little adventure that's well worth your time.